What was the altar of burnt offering? This is the question that we seek to answer today as we continue our verse-by-verse study of the book of Exodus on walking through the Bible.
Wonders of his word, the glory of his cross.
If you have a Bible with you, you can turn to Exodus 27. We're going to be reading from verses 1 to 8. If you don't have a Bible, don't worry. Just follow along with us on the screen. The version that we'll be reading from is the New King James Version. So, Exodus 27, beginning at verse 1. You shall make an altar of acacia wood, 5 cubits long and 5 cubits wide. The altar shall be square, and the height shall be 3 cubits. You shall make its horns on its 4 corners. Its horns shall be of one piece with it, and you shall overlay it with bronze. Also you shall make its pans to receive its ashes, and its shovels, and its basins, and its forks, and its fire pans. You shall make all its utensils of bronze. You shall make a grate for it, a network of bronze, and on the network you shall make 4 bronze rings at its 4 corners. You shall put under the rim of the altar beneath, that the network may be midway up the altar. And you shall make poles for the altar, poles of acacia wood, and overlay them with bronze. The poles shall be put in the rings, and the poles shall be on the 2 sides of the altar to bear it. You shall make it hollow with boards, and as it was shown to you on the mountain, so shall they make it. In the last 2 chapters, we've been discussing God's instructions to Moses for the making of the sanctuary. Chapter 25 dealt with the making of the Ark of the Covenant, the mercy seat, the table for showbread, and the golden lampstand. Chapter 26 dealt with the making of the actual tabernacle, as well as where all those holy items in chapter 25 were to be placed. Chapter 27 continues with instructions for the sanctuary. In today's reading, we focus on the altar of burnt offering, sometimes referred to as the bronze or brazen altar. Now we're going to read here in Exodus of 2 altars, the altar of burnt offering, and then in chapter 30, the altar of incense. The altar of burnt offering is the one we often think of when we think of altars under the Mosaic Law, because it was on this altar that the sacrifices are going to be offered. According to Exodus 40, verse 6, it would be set up outside the door of the tabernacle, not inside the tabernacle itself. This altar, like that of the Ark of the Covenant, the showbread table, and the walls of the tabernacle, were to be made of acacia wood. It was to be square, measuring 5 cubits by 5 cubits, and was to stand 3 cubits tall. A cubit is 45.72 centimeters, or 1.5 feet, so the altar measured 228.6 centimeters long by 228.6 centimeters wide by 137.16 centimeters high, or 7.5 feet long by 7.5 feet wide by 4.5 feet tall. It was to have horns on its 4 corners and be of one piece, meaning they were actually part of the altar, not simply attached to it. What the horns of the altar would do is that they would assist in the entire procedure, for they would help hold the carcass up from falling into a dense heap on the altar. Adonijah, one of David's sons, being afraid of Solomon, grabbed onto the horns of this altar in order that he might live. That story is found in 1 Kings 1, verse 50. The entire altar, including the horns, were to be overlaid with bronze. Why wasn't this altar overlaid with gold like the one in Exodus 30 would be? Because the fire needed to burn these sacrifices would require a harder material than gold, or the altar would be destroyed. The burnt offerings would always produce ashes, so you needed a way to dispose of the ashes. There were pans used for this purpose. You would also need other utensils for the altar, like forks, censers, and shovels. And then you would need a way of catching the blood so that it could be poured on the altar, so there were basins for that. All of these utensils would be made of bronze. There also was to be a grate on which to lay the animal. This grate was to be made of bronze. At the 4 corners of the grate, there would be 4 bronze rings. This grate would be allowed to go under the top rim of the altar as far as the middle of the altar. Just like with the Ark of the Covenant and the showbread table, this altar needed to be transported. So there would be rings placed in the side, and by inference, these rings would be made of bronze. Poles of acacia wood were to be overlaid with bronze that would be made to go through the rings on the side of the altar. It could then be carried by those tasked with doing so. It was told to Moses that the altar would be made hollow with boards. Some suppose that this means that when the altar was not being transported, that the altar would be filled with earth, following directions in Exodus 20, verses 24 and 25, but such is not said here, so we cannot assume this. Rather than reading too much into it, all it seems to me to be saying is that it wouldn't have a top or a bottom, but would be hollow, thus allowing the burnt sacrifices to be offered. Again, though, we see God telling Moses to follow the directions given as he had seen on the mountain. God expected when he was specific that the people followed his directions exactly. When he gave some freedom, they could make some choices. But when it came to the sanctuary, very little choice was given. With that, our time is up for today. Lord willing, we hope you'll join us for tomorrow's discussion of Exodus 27, verses 9 to 15, as we continue our walk through the Bible, one verse at a time.
I'm not ashamed.
Thank you for watching today's episode. We hope that you found it edifying and ask that you not only subscribe to our channel and podcast, but that you like and share this episode among your friends, so that the saving gospel of Jesus Christ can go out to the whole world.
Of his cross.